Thank you so much for that. I'm Tara Heitner, CEO of Cyxone. And Cyxone is a Swedish company located at, sorry, I'm trying to move my slides here, located in the south of Sweden, and it was founded in 2016. We're focusing at Cyxone on developing really breakthrough therapies for disorders of the immune system, where our focus is on autoimmune diseases. Now, with autoimmune diseases, your immune system, which is meant to protect one against infections and diseases like cancer, instead turns against you, attacking one's own healthy tissues and organs. At Cyxone, we're focused on rheumatoid arthritis, where we're developing Rabeximod, and multiple sclerosis, where we're developing T20K. Now, autoimmune diseases are diseases which are chronic. That means they last for a lifetime. These are not diseases which you necessarily die from. They're diseases you must live with for a very long time. And for these patients, it's a very confusing type of diagnosis because of the constant pain, the constant degradation of their tissues if untreated. And we're trying to make a difference for these patients in terms of maintaining quality of life and lifestyle, in addition to treating the disease at a disease-modifying level. Now, we also have a program in COVID-19, as you must have noticed, which is also in phase 2, and we've completed this trial recently. Now, this is an acute setting, so different from the autoimmune diseases. COVID-19 is an infection and an acute condition. So this gives us the opportunity also to test if Rabeximod, our lead candidate, is relevant in an acute setting, such as COVID-19 or other acute settings. But let's start with rheumatoid arthritis. Why do we need new treatments for rheumatoid arthritis? Well, there is currently a standard of care which is available for first diagnosed patients, which is called methotrexate. And what's important to note is that, unfortunately, only 40% of patients that are first diagnosed actually respond well to methotrexate, and another 25% respond but can't tolerate the treatment, and they have terrible side effects. So the drugs are other drugs are tried or attempted. Some are like hydrochloroquine, also have bad side effects. And combinations are used with steroids to try to keep the disease from progressing. But all of these drugs have very bad side effects. So the disease typically progresses, and treatment is escalated to things like biological treatments. We may have heard of TNF-alpha inhibitors and IL-6 inhibitors. And these have come on the market about a decade ago. And when they came on the market, they made a huge impact for this therapeutic area and for patients. However, unfortunately, only 30% of RA patients respond well to any given biological. The remainder respond inadequately or not at all. And furthermore, those who do respond well only for a period of time. After a number of years, 5, 6, maybe maximum 10 years, they stop responding to the drug. They become resistant to the treatment, and new treatments are therefore needed. JAK inhibitors came on the market also recently, and these were thought to be a game changer for rheumatoid arthritis patients. They do make a difference. However, recently they have been under scrutiny due to some severe side effects, cardiovascular side effects, and risk of cancer and infection. And so they're more relegated to a third or fourth line treatment potentially in the future. But what RA patients today are faced with is a very complex disease state that they have to live with for decades. And in order to keep their disease in remission, constant treatment switches in a trial and error type of mode, where some of these also have some side effects. This is where Cyxone is trying to make a difference. Rabeximod is a small molecule oral drug, so we can take it as a pill, with a novel mode of action. Now, the mode of action acts on one of the fundamental bases for the disease, which is the destruction of the joint. And what is known is that this is caused mainly by a subset of immune cells called hostile macrophages. So Rabeximod works by preventing the development of hostile macrophages from the immature monocyte in the bone, but also prevents the expression of multiple cytokines and chemokines, which are expressed by the macrophages and help to recruit more cells, immune cells, to the joint to amplify the destruction. What Rabeximod does, it goes inside the cell, the immune cell, upstream, stopping the pathway that leads to these cytokines. So unlike biological drugs, which actually mop up the cytokines after they've been expressed, Rabeximod instead turns off the tap and thus protects the joint from damage and prevents the progression of rheumatoid arthritis. Now, what's also interesting about Rabeximod is it doesn't just inhibit one cytokine. So you might recognize IL-6 on this slide and TNF-alpha. It does have an effect on suppressing TNF-alpha and IL-6, but also a host of other very important inflammatory cytokines and chemokines, which are also responsible for destruction of the joint. So we expect, and our hypothesis is, that this type of polypharmacy will give Rabeximod a broader applicability across a broader patient range. So our vision for Rabeximod is that we are attempting to develop it as a first-line treatment that can be used as an alternative to methotrexate for those patients who don't respond to methotrexate or those who cannot tolerate methotrexate. And because it is a orally taken drug, which has a very good safety profile compared to TNF-alpha and methotrexate, we expect that patients may be able to stay on Rabeximod for a longer period of time, keeping their disease at bay, keeping the disease in remission, and preventing or delaying the need for treatment escalation. Now, why do we believe this can be delivered? It is based on data that we already have in over 225 RA patients in our phase 2A trial, which was run previously. This trial was done in moderate to severe RA patients, although we do know that the proportion of patients in this trial were actually quite severe and had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis for over 5 years, sometimes as long as 10 years, so a quite severe patient population. Despite this, we were able to see improvements in efficacy starting already at 8 weeks, increasing at 12 weeks. This is over the baseline, and statistically significant improvements shown at 16 weeks follow-up. And so we believe we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and this trend will continue to increase if we continue to treat. Now, what's also important to note is this treatment is not alone. It's not a monotherapy. This is done on top of methotrexate, so you're seeing an improvement on top of methotrexate. So in our upcoming phase 2B trial, which is currently in the planning phases, we have made significant improvements to the design to allow us to ensure we get a positive result. So first of all, as you know, from the previous trial, phase 2A, at the end of the study, we saw statistically significant improvements over methotrexate. So in our upcoming trial, we are going to move our endpoint out to 16 weeks. But we're also going to increase the likelihood of a signal even potentially at 12 or 8 weeks by narrowing the inclusion criteria to less severe RA patients. So we're going to focus on moderate to severe RA patients. And we are going to focus on patients diagnosed within the first 3 months. So to give the drug a better chance of showing the full potential of its effect in patients. We're also going to run 2 doses. So we're going to have a 15 milligram dose and a 30 milligram dose, and possibly an open label treatment extension after the primary endpoint. And what this allows us to do is to allow patients who respond well to Rabeximod to continue on treatment for a bit longer. Allows us to get more safety and efficacy data as well. So with this design, we have a very, very good likelihood of producing a positive result in the phase 2b trial. So as I mentioned, we are currently heavily involved in preparations for the phase 2b trial, including engagement of a world-class global CRO, where we aim to, as quickly as possible, enroll patients into the trial in 2022. And this will allow us to get a top-line results in early 2024, if everything goes well. And we also will continue with our partnership activities, where we are looking for an early-stage partnership. Many discussions are ongoing with pharma companies in different regions. And we also will keep the opportunity open for a later-stage partnership following the phase 2b readout. So our plan is to partner and then to develop this further into phase 3 with a strategic partner who has the capabilities for market authorization and commercialization and distribution. As I mentioned, rheumatoid arthritis is a very large market. There are millions of patients worldwide. The current estimates are that it's about a $30 billion market, US dollar market. Now, and this constitutes about 6 million patients worldwide, and this is constantly increasing. If we focus only in on those patients that are methotrexate non-responders, that's 2.5 million, and narrow down to our markets of focus, which are in the EU and United States, this corresponds to 500,000 RA patients, so a subset of RA patients. We're being very conservative here. And if we assume at peak that we would have a 20% market penetration and assume $10,000 per year reimbursement, then we can easily see that it's possible to attain a blockbuster potential for Rabeximod, even though we're only going for a subset of RA patients. Just an update on the COVID-19. As I mentioned, this trial was run in 2021 and in 90 moderate COVID patients. The trial is currently completed, and we are in the analysis period. The top-line results are expected before the end of the year. And our plans going forward with this is to wait for the results, which will have the full report in Q1 of 2022. And based on feedback from the FDA and EMA on the necessity for new drugs in COVID-19, we will consider moving this further together through a non-dilutive financing, a grant, or a commercial partnership. This also opens up the possibility for developing in other acute indications where you have other viral infections of the lung, because Rabeximod works on inflammation associated with the viral infection. Now, finally, an update on our very exciting program on multiple sclerosis. In multiple sclerosis, as I mentioned, this is a devastating chronic disease where the immune system incorrectly attacks the myelin sheath on the neuron, so that in the CNS. And when this happens, immune cells come in, incorrectly attack it as foreign, and destroy the myelin sheath. And this can lead to incorrect signaling across the neuron, leading to multiple different symptoms, such as cognitive disorders, lack of balance, tingling, and potentially even sudden loss of eyesight. It hits people in the very prime of their life when they're about to start families, start careers in school, and there are millions of patients worldwide. The majority of patients have cases of remitting, relapsing multiple sclerosis, and 15% have a progressive type. Now, there are therapies for multiple sclerosis which slow down the progression. However, inevitably, the disease does progress, and what happens, patients end up confined to wheelchair in the worst cases, and unable to take care of themselves in the very worst cases. Current therapies exist, but there's a long process to diagnosis and associating the right drug to the right patient. Requires a lot of testing, and there's a lot of side effects with the drugs, so a lot of treatment switches. So T20K is a potential new drug, a disease-modifying drug with a completely new mode of action. It acts by preventing the immune attack on the cells and can potentially prevent progression at an early stage. T20K blocks the IL-2 expression from T cells and IL-2 receptor expression on T cells, thereby shutting down the immune attack. This is IL-2 is a cytokine that's known to be very implicated in the disease progression. And so far we have data from preclinical models, animal models, showing efficacy. And we also have a limited phase 1 trial giving us some indication that this is also safe in patients. So just an example of some of the data we have in a mouse model of multiple sclerosis. Here you show is a therapeutic model where the mice are developing disease, and at 12 days they have already symptoms of multiple sclerosis. We administer T20K, which is the red line, 3 times, and you can see that we completely stop the progression of the disease in the mouse model. We can also show that we stop demyelination of the nerve and the inflammatory attack in the CNS. So very encouraging data, and this is just a sample of a very large preclinical data set that we have. Right now, we're involved in finalizing our lead formulation. We are trying to make a decision between a administration form, and we have run a number of studies that have been encouraging, and now we know that both oral and sub-Q administered T20K show therapeutic efficacy. So that gives us many more options moving forward, which is great. Once we make a decision on administration route, which should be as soon as possible, we will enter into non-clinical studies in 2022. MS is also a very large market opportunity. It's a 33 billion global market, and there are in Europe and US about 200,000 patients that we would address. So if we're conservative and assume at peak we would have a 10% market penetration and assume an average yearly cost of $50,000 per year, then we also could expect that reasonable that we could get a blockbuster status, $1 billion at peak. Now, we're also looking into alternative indications, both for Rabeximod and T20K. So if we look at Rabeximod in particular in RA, there is a large increase in value of a potential pharma deal if we make a deal before phase 2B readout or after. But there's an even larger potential after the phase 2B if we make a multi-indication deal. So if we look at RA and potentially 1 or 2 other autoimmune diseases. And this is our goal. This is what we are setting out to do in the upcoming years. So that way we will be able to leverage on all the full value of our assets. So as I mentioned, our vision as a company in the long-term plan is to continue with our current pipeline, to expand on indications for Rabeximod in autoimmune diseases and neuroinflammatory diseases, to also expand on indications for T20K in autoimmune and neuroinflammatory indications, and to move forward with COVID-19 only if we have a commercial interest or interest from one of the regulatory bodies in the EU or the FDA to support this going forward. Now, going forward, we have a number of different long-term and near-term value inflection points that can lead to upside potential, including the near-term COVID-19 top-line results and the initiation of the RA study. We would expect, we're looking forward to putting together some partnerships on Rabeximod, both in the near term and in the long term. Patient enrollment will be a very important milestone in 2022, and potentially even an interim readout. The trial will read out in 2024, and that probably will coincide with a partnership, pending the data readout, initiation of phase 3 with our potential partner. When we look at T20K, the near-term inflection points are, of course, the decision on administration route and initiation of non-clinical studies. Readouts of these studies will be also important indication points in 2023, which will allow us to continue our clinical development of T20K. Now, in order to achieve all this, we have put together a stellar team of very experienced an executive team, including a new Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Cornell Patter, who has decades of experience in running trials, but also specifically in running and designing rheumatoid arthritis trials. Carl Magnus Högerkop, who has executive experience from the biotech industry, also therapeutic area experience in autoimmune disorders from his years at Novo Nordisk, and a PhD in immunology. And finally, Henrik Hang, who has come to us to bring us the expertise in governance and compliance needed for running a company on the stock market, as well as helping with the uplisting process. And finally, I bring also to the company expertise in startups, in founding companies, in making business deals, fundraising, and also a great passion for moving important therapies into the clinic to help patients. So with that, I hope that I have given you an update on Cyxone. We're a company focusing on autoimmune diseases, chronic diseases which affect people for a lifetime, large commercial potential diseases, and we will deliver on several value inflection points, both in the near term and in the long term. Happy to take questions.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Tara. I'm happy to say that we have a lot of questions sent in beforehand. There seems to be a lot of interest in your company. So let me start with the Rabeximod phase 2b study that you announced plans to accelerate the activities within. Do you have an estimate of the cost and financing?
Yes, we do. We have an estimate for the trial costs. And we have an idea of what that's costing now, because we're working with a CRO, and they have given us a proposal. However, the final proposal is being negotiated, so we're working on the actual final cost.
I see. Now, I have a pretty broad question, maybe. For many investing in biotech companies, it's risky, as the outcome is usually pretty binary. Either the company succeeds with its candidates or they do not. What key components do you see in your candidates that will take you all the way to the market? Well,
I think for Rabeximod, for example, the fact that we already have clinical data, a lot of clinical data, and especially the safety profile, gives us confidence that this can be developed and get into the clinic. Beyond RA, we have, of course, a lot of data in RA, but we also have additional data, preclinical data in other indications showing that this mode of action is relevant in other autoimmune diseases. So this also gives us confidence that we can de-risk Rabeximod by developing it, not just for RA, but for other important autoimmune diseases where this hostile macrophage is also key to the progression of the disease. And this occurs in many, many settings. So there are many different opportunities for us to develop Rabeximod. T20K also has working on a central pathway. IL-2 is a cytokine which is implicated in multiple sclerosis, but also in many other settings and disease settings. And so if you can modulate IL-2 receptor, there are the potential to develop T20K beyond multiple sclerosis. So with our team and the expertise we have in immunology as well as clinical trials, I think we can leverage on the full potential of our assets.
Now, I have a question about the COVID candidate as well. If you have success with it, is there a chance that you will develop more candidates towards SARS, influenza, or other viruses?
Yeah, if for example we are able to show that Rabeximod is relevant in an acute setting, then yeah, it could be a drug which could be relevant in any macrophage overactivation syndrome which occurs in viral infections of the lung. And as you mentioned, in influenza, which kills millions of people every year around the globe, as well as other viral infections, SARS and MERS, for example. We don't have direct plans to do this in the upcoming year, and we would do this likely together with a potential partner. So when I've talked about partnerships about Rabeximod, then ideally we could identify a partner that could see the potential both for the chronic and the acute setting if it's relevant. And that will be more clear once we get the top line data.
Of course. Now I have a question about a bit more operational nature maybe. Is there any space for the current staff to take on a possible new drug candidate, or are they're full-time at work with what you have already? Or if they have time, is there any plans for doing so?
That's a good question. The team right now is it's a small team, but of course we have expanded a lot since I joined. We're about 10 full-time in the company now and growing. We do have the ambition to expand our pipeline by bringing in new assets in the future. But ideally we would do this with some revenue from our partnering plans, and once we get income from one of our potential partner, then that could give us the opportunity to bring on the team members and expand the pipeline. So that would be more our strategy for expanding the pipeline.
How many employees do you have today?
We are about total of about 10, and we have a combination of full-time employees and full-time consultants, and then a very large repertoire of part-time consultants we use to make sure we can deliver on our goals.
I asked that because I had another question here about Chairman Bert. I'll just read the question because I'm screwing it up right now. This question is, "Hi Tara, I saw that Combigene struck a good licensing deal. Even though it's another company, I see that Chairman Bert is present in both. How do you utilize his field of experience?"
Yeah, that's a good question too. So the board of Cyxone is just fantastic and bring a lot of expertise, but we definitely rely on I draw from them a lot when needed. Bert has a great network, and he also has been very supportive in expanding our network and reaching out to new investors, partners, and we continue to work very closely together. For example, in the upcoming JP Morgan, we'll be attending that, both Bert and I together. So exploiting his great network with investors and partners, and also my network, especially in North America.
Following up on that as well, in your presentation you highlighted a potential partnership could be pursued in 2022 or 2024. What criteria would need to be fulfilled to strike a deal earlier? Well,
we see the value of a deal to be the greatest after the phase 2b readout, as you could see from my graphs. And that's standard across the industry. Once you get proof of concept data, that's where the deal inflection goes up. So if we made a global deal today, we would maybe give away a lot of that value. So in order to get the benefit of we want to get the benefit of the market validation by making an early deal now, but not give away the full value of the asset. The idea is to make a small regional deal in a appropriate geographic area where there is a lot of interest, and then potentially make a larger deal for US and Europe after the phase 2b readout.
Tara Heitner, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the very good questions.